My name is Madeline, and today we're going to talk about some of the features and functionalities of Geometer Sketchpad. So the first thing that we want to do when we open our Sketchpad is to just make sure that our text palette and toolbox are displayed. So I'm going to go up to Display, Show Text Palette, and then Display again, Show Toolbox. This just makes sure that all the functions that we have are available and accessible. Another key thing that you want to keep in mind with Geometer Sketchpad is just make sure that anytime you're constructing or trying to create something, that you always have your clicker. Let's say if you try to create a point or something and then you don't go back to the clicker, you might have the problem of creating multiple points. So that's just something to keep in mind. The first thing that I will show you is the point feature that I just talked about a little bit. So I'm going to go down below the clicker to the point, and we can construct a point anywhere in the space. So I'm going to go ahead and construct it right here. And then, like I said, make sure that you go back to your clicker, because if we don't, you still have the point application clicked on, and then you'll start creating points without even meaning to. And then in order to delete, we can just highlight it and then just hit delete. Or if we need to, we can just delete it that way. Okay, so now that I created a point, I wanted to show you guys how to create a segment and different lines and features from that point. So one of the neat things that we can do with Geometer Sketchpad is create different shapes and circles and polygons. So if we go down below the point and we find the circle feature, we highlight over the point and we can actually create a circle using that point as the center of the circle. So we just highlight it and then we can move it to our desired circumference. And then remembering to go back to the point. Now we have all this highlighted, so we can actually move it over so we can see it. And now if we wanted to change the circumference or the radius of the shape, we can just use the point on the circle and move it the way that we desire. Okay. Now I can actually construct different lines, segments, and rays. So I'm going to go ahead and create a segment. So the way that I do that is I'm going to hold down the line feature. I'm going to click the first one, which recognizes that as a segment. And then I can go through and make the segment however long that I want to. And then remembering to go back to our pointer feature. And we can move this any which way we want to. We can connect it to a point. We can create different shapes. So that's one of the really neat features with Geometer Sketchpad, is that you can just create many different things from many different functions. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. We can also create an array. So this will extend in one direction because, as we know from the definition of array, they do extend into one direction. And if we wanted to, we could actually connect to this point on a circle. Now notice how you do not see the end of the array, and that is because of the definition that array extends on infinitely. So the Sketchpad really does a nice job at making sure that it's accurate in its definitions. And going back to our pointer, we can see that we can move this any which way that we'd like to. And now I'm going to use the line feature. So I can go and create a line. And notice how this also extends in two directions, because from our definition of a line, a line extends infinitely, so you'll not be able to see an end to it. We're going to go ahead and go back to our pointer feature. Something else that I would like to show you before I move on to the other features of this tool is that you have all these options up here about what we can do. So we can edit the color of the line, the point style. So let's say that I wanted to make the point style larger. I would go to point style and then large. And I can do the same thing to this point style, large. I can also change the color of any of these features. So I'll go to display and highlight what you want to change. I'll go to color, and then let's say I want to make it blue. Also with that, we can choose how other displays look. So if we want to change the line style, we can make it thick, and then we can also change it to dotted if we wish. That doesn't really change anything about any properties of a line other than the way that it appears, so it will be really useful if you were trying to differentiate between different lines. It might be useful to have them show up in a different way or a different color. Something else you can do on the display screen is create text. So let's say I wanted to type something. I can highlight it, and then I can go up here and change the font. So I'll just pick a random one. I can bold it, I can italicize it, I can underline it. And another cool thing about Geometer Sketchpad is that it actually has different function notation. So let's say I wanted to say x squared. I can click on this, and I can say x raised to the power of 2. And that's just a really nice feature so that you don't have to copy and paste the different function notation in here. I can also describe a line, array, or segment with the correct notation. So let's say I'm talking about line AB. If I highlight this, I can make sure that it has the notation of a line. And the same thing with array, a segment, and even an arc. So that's really one of the really useful tools about this. Notice how we also have our options for absolute value. If we're trying to show a set, we can do the angle, the degree, pi, congruent. So we have a lot of different mathematical language tools that will be really useful in the syntax of your display. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. Oh, yes, and while I just accidentally did this, so one of the also really neat features about this is that if we click on the line, it'll actually name it for us and have the correct notation. So I'll go ahead and show you that again. So if we hover over the G, notice how a green plus sign shows up. If we want to click on that, it'll name it for us, but if we click on the line, it'll name the line for us with the correct notation. So that's something that's really useful in naming things and getting students able to name accurately. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my pointer and get all this deleted. So in order to delete, like I said, you can just highlight, or you can drag over to highlight and just hit delete. So the next tool that I'm going to show you is the creation of a polygon. So we can have a clear one, or we can have it filled in with color. So I'm going to choose a clear one. Our line is still dotted, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. But we can create any number of sided polygon, which is really useful. Ooh, I think I accidentally deleted it. So if I want to create a triangle, and notice we can move it in any which way, and it moves as you move it. Let's say I want to make one that's filled in. Notice how it's just filled with color, and that's the only difference. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. The next thing that we can do, and it's also really helpful, is the text tool. We can label things with this. It also helps you change the text of something. So I'm just going to create a line. Actually, I'll create a segment. So I can use a labeling tool, and I'm going to point over what I want labeled. So this is going to be point I, and this is going to be point J. And then I can also name the line J. So we're going to go back to our pointer tool. And also, let's say that you didn't want this named I and J. Let's say we want it named A or B. We can double click on it and rename it accordingly. And you can do that with anything that's labeled. And notice how it has the correct notation of a line being undercase and a point being uppercase, which is really helpful in determining the difference between what is labeled and what is not. Let's see. The next tool that I'm going to show you is the freestyle tool. This one is really neat because if you need to write something, or if I just don't want to use all the different tools, I can, write how I need to. It's a little bit harder to use this tool on a laptop than it would be maybe like an iPad or something. So that would be the only discretion that I would say with that, is that it would be a lot easier on a tablet where you have a stylus or something. Also, with this tool, it's not only for a freestyle. Notice how when I hover over this line, it sort of changes the display of what this tool is. So I can actually create a tick mark. So let's say I have two. I'll create another line. If I'm trying to show that this line is parallel, this tool is really helpful because this tick mark indicates that they're congruent, or that they're parallel, or any other number of things. Also, with this tool, we can create angles. So let me go back and create a polygon. I can click on my freestyle pool. I'm going to pull up, and it creates my angle marking for me. The nice thing about the angle markings too is that we can actually change the color of these. So if I just right click, I can go to color, and then let's say I want to make it purple, and I can do that with all of them. And then as we move it, the angles change and the notation changes. So the last few things that I want to show you, going down below the stylus tool is actually if we look at the eye. So the neat thing about this is that we can click on it and click on any. Notice how a question mark pops up about the different features. So I'm going to click on the point, and it tells me what the definition of, or what that object is. So it's telling me that point number 46 is an independent object, which means that it moves independently of the other things. So I can actually go in and click on any of that thing. So the angle marker marks this simple angle, and that's showing me where it's marking the angle. So I can do that with anything. It just gives me a simple explanation of what this is. Yes, and when we go back to the clicker, it disappears, so it's kind of just like a 1 second thing. So that's what that does. This feature is actually for different tools. So you can create custom tools, and basically that's useful because let's say if you create a triangle that's dynamically linked, you can actually save that triangle as a tool. So that way, every time you want, a right triangle, you don't have to go back and recreate that right triangle. You'll already have it in your tool folder. So some of the tools that I've created is logic tool. So let's say I'm trying to make a proof of something. I can use my if-then tool, which just creates the simple notation for an if-then statement. Let me go ahead and delete all of this. The other tools that I have are, I can create a parabola, I can create an ellipse, I can create regular polygons. So I have one saved for an equilateral triangle by edge. So this is already a pre-made equilateral triangle that I don't have to sit there and try to measure and make sure that it's equilateral by changing or manipulating the different side lengths, which is really useful if I'm just trying to do something quick and just want to show something. Some other features of Geometer Sketchpad that are not listed on the side. Like I said, we have tools up here that we can use. We can construct a point on an object. We can construct midpoints and intersection, segments, rays, lines. Let's say if you didn't want to use the segment ray or line tool, you can use these. We can construct parallel lines. So if we already have a line drawn and we want to construct the parallel line to that, we'll be able to do that. We can create a perpendicular line, an angle bisector, a circle by center and point, a circle by center and radius, an arc on a circle, and let's say if we want to construct the interior, that would just be the filling color. And notice how they're all grayed out. So I don't have anything highlighted that I will be able to use that for. So let me show you the difference. So let's say I'm going to create a segment. So I'm going to highlight the entire segment with the points. And then now it's showing me all the options that I have, and I can click on which one I want. So I'm going to go ahead and say perpendicular line. So now it has created a perpendicular line for me. Let's say, well, how do we know that it's perpendicular? We can actually go back to our stylus tool, pull up to create an angle, and it shows that it's a right angle. So that tells us that it's perpendicular. Some of the other things that we can do, one of the really cool things that I like is that Geometer Sketchpad is actually dynamic, so it changes in real time. So if I create a segment, I'm going to highlight every aspect of the segment, so the endpoints, the line, and the segment. The endpoints and the segment. I'm going to go to Transform, Mark Vector, and then I'm going to create another segment. And I'm going to highlight every aspect of this segment. I'm going to go to Transform, Translate, and then notice how whenever I move this one, the other one moves. So you can create dynamically linked tools, which is really helpful in noticing how properties of different things change as you change something. So if I change the distance of one line, the other one changes. Something that this is really useful for is if you're trying to show similar triangles. So if you construct a triangle that's similar to another triangle, you can actually show that it stays the same whichever way you move it, which is really helpful for students to engage with. And notice how if I delete the first line, it deletes the other one. Another useful thing that we can do is we can measure. So let's say I want to measure the distance between the points. It'll pop up like this. Obviously there's no distance from in. But if I were to say M to N, then it would show me with an actual distance, and when I move it, it changes to accordingly. So go ahead and get rid of that. You can also measure different things. So let's say I create a circle. I can highlight the circle, and I can measure the circumference. I can measure the area. And I can also measure the radius even if I don't have one drawn. So, and then notice how the measurements change as I change the circle. So that's something that's really helpful for students to see as you're changing it, what is being manipulated. So other things that we can do, we can create a function, we can tabulate data. So let's say that I wanted to put all this data into a table. I can go to number and tabulate, and it'll actually put that in the table for me. We can also calculate different things. So I can use a certain expression. I can graph if I wanted to show grid. I can plot points, so that's super useful for more algebraic stuff and slope and y-intercept. I can plot points. I can plot a function, a parametric curve, and we can even do the grid form. So let's say I'm looking at polars, I can change it to polar. Something else that's super useful in Sketchpad that would be useful in a classroom is the accuracy of it. So let's say that I'm talking about angles and I want an angle that's exactly 100 degrees. So go ahead and create an angle. I can highlight this angle. I can mark it if I want to. And then it's going to show me the measurement of this angle. So let's say I want one that's exactly 100 degrees. I can manipulate it. I don't know if it'll let me get it exactly to 100. But I can highlight it and copy it and use it as on a PowerPoint if I didn't want to, guess what 100-degree angle looked like. This is an accurate representation of what that looks like. So your model is accurate and you're not just assuming that, that's what it looks like. You can also use this to have students explore properties of triangles. So if I wanted to create a triangle, and I wanted them to see that the angles of a triangle always add up to equal 180, I can highlight each. I can highlight each angle, measure angles, and then I can also calculate the sum and it shows me that it always equals 180. As I manipulate this and change it, notice how it still changes. It still equals 180 no matter what the degrees are. So that's something that can definitely be used in a geometry classroom, where if you want students to explore on their own, they can come to that conceptual understanding on their own with exploration that a triangle always equals 180 degrees. So that's all I have for you. There's other motions of learning how to use Geometer Sketchpad. It's really easy and simple to use. So thank you for listening.